The views and opinions expressed on Coffee and Compatibility are those of the podcast host and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of ASHI.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the last day of the 51st annual meeting of the American Society of Histocompatibility and Immunogenetics. I am your Coffee and Compatibility co-host, Kelly Hitchman.
Hi, Eric Weimer and
Jeremy Sherrill.
All right. I hope you guys have your coffee. I hope you're ready to rumble because we have a nice, spicy guest for you today. Before we get to the heat, though, we have some particulars that we need to announce that are really, really exciting. We have the honor of announcing the 2025 ASHI Poster Award winner, the People's Choice Award winner. And I believe the lovely Gloria has the winner in.
This was the way Gloria made sure we said her name while we were doing this, just so everybody knows. This was the specific moment. I'm not a written.
It's too much pressure.
Okay.
Too much pressure. I can't.
I'm already sweating.
I'm very good under
It's
pressure.
I'm sweating up here.
Too much pressure.
All right, and the winner is Poster 611. That's the curious case of sporadic amplification with the same manufacturer's lot of Taq polymerase, and that goes to John Lowridge.
All right.
Congratulations, John. People's Choice Poster Award winner.
Well done.
All right, and I do believe you can get a hold of the ASHI staff, or the ASHI staff will be contacting you with your award.
Awesome.
So guys, last day, how was the week?
It was a week. It's a lot of fun, right? It's being able to see everyone and network and talk with people you don't see, or like you just see their face or name on a Zoom, right? You know, I think eplets, right? It was like hot and cold. Here and now.
Little eplet, lot of AI.
Oh, yeah.
Lot of AI. Lot of AI, in a good way. I think everybody did a great job. Having Dr. Lupi here was outstanding. We had some really, really high power guests this year that taught us a lot.
Speaking of high power, the thing that took me back the most was seeing just Eric has been lifting the weights. Like, I don't know if anyone else noticed this, but we all need to figure out. We need to figure out what brand of protein shakes Eric is using.
It's the sponsor to be named.
That'll be posted on the YouTube channel later on.
It's impressive that Jeremy and I are here because we were out late last night getting our dance on. It was super fun. You were missing from.
Yeah, I was missing.
What were you doing?
I was in the gym working out.
If you work in an HLA lab, you know the importance of proficiency testing. ASHI's PT program offers high-quality samples, competitive pricing, and user-friendly software. These features make it a reliable choice for laboratories worldwide. With ASHI's PT program, HLA laboratories can improve protocols, meet regulatory requirements, and uphold high standards. Due to high demand, laboratories are encouraged to place their orders early, as availability may be limited. Place your 2026 order today. For more information, contact the PT Program Manager by email at chartman@ashi-hla.org.
Well, without further ado, I want to get to our guests. So I really cannot tell you how fortunate we are to have Dr. Macey Levan with us today. When I talked to Macey about coming here to do this, we were at WTC. I had her cornered at breakfast.
Best way to do it.
She was knowingly flying to Switzerland and then coming back to the States for something else. And when she leaves here right after this meeting, she has to fly straight to San Diego to give another talk, and she very generously agreed to be with us here today. So Macey is an associate professor of surgery and population health at NYU Langone, where she also serves as director of policy and external affairs for the Transplant Institute. She does a lot of research focused on improving the transplant system and the experiences of patients and donors. She's led many national initiatives on organ donation. She co-chairs the Alliance for Donation and Transplantation's National Innovation Leadership Council. She is the social media editor for Transplantation, the journal. She also hosts a podcast series that brings patients, families, and professionals together to discuss advances in organ donation. And when she's not working on research or policy, which kind of seems like that should never happen at this point, Macey channels her passion for storytelling into a TV and film production certificate at NYU. So she's also in the schooling. And outside of that, the reason that I feel so fortunate to have Macey is that her expertise is so broadly spread. Macey is herself a living kidney donor, and she has served on the executive functions of the OPTN board before. She was the head of the Patient and Donor Affairs Committee for a while. She works with all facets of transplantation, and so we're going to get to ask her about a lot of things, including xenotransplantation today. So without further ado, Macey, if you could join us. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. This is for you.
Okay, thank you. So I want to start off today, Macey, before we dive in. Macey and I were chatting by text, and
I'm not in that group.
Came across a post on LinkedIn yesterday that I don't know if people in the audience have seen, but I think it puts the position that we're in today in the US and our transplant system here into an interesting frame. Yesterday, Maureen McBride, the Chief Executive Officer at UNOS, posted, for the first time ever during a federal government shutdown, the United Network of Organ Sharing, in its capacity as an OPTN contractor, has been directed by the government to pause its critically important OPTN work. This has never happened before, and it requires urgent action. It's about patients, peoples whose lives depend on safe, stable systems to facilitate the life-saving treatments they need. She goes on to say that our country's organ donation and transplant system is headed towards operational challenges after December 29th, when the current contract for UNOS to manage the majority of the OPTN operations expires. After that, the government has no authorization in place with any organization to fully support the OPTN or manage an organ wait list to allocate organs. One part that I was not aware of is this part where she says the federal government owes UNOS more than $10 million in reimbursement for OPTN-related work dating back to 2024 that has already been completed. Wow.
Does not sound like a great situation.
Wow. Macey, you have had lots of experience in the OPTN. I'm interested in what you think about where the OPTN is right now and what you felt like your general experience being part of the executive leadership of the OPTN was.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you all today, and thanks for the invitation to join your podcast and to talk about these really critical issues. So this is unprecedented that I believe government shutdown has actually impacted the OPTN in the past. Government shutdowns did not impact operations. I do think there's a little politics at play here, and I do think that some of the political challenges that have been faced with the OPTN are being utilized now to kind of push some agendas. And my experience as the former Vice President of Patient and Donor Affairs was, as much as it was one of the honors of my life, it was one of the most challenging years of my life. And it resulted in a resignation. So I, along with Kelly and others, members of the board of directors, resigned from the OPTN. And we resigned from the OPTN because we did not feel that the direction that it was going was in the best interests of patients, donors, families, and generally the American public. There's a function called a critical comment. You may have heard about a critical comment being made about procurement technology, like NRP, for example. You may have heard about a critical comment about out-of-sequence organ allocation being made. We made another critical comment as a group of patients to the government and about what HRSA was doing and not doing in the name of patients. That critical comment directed to HRSA was ignored. To this day, still has not been acknowledged. And that prompted 8 of the 10 patient donor affairs representatives from the OPTN to resign. We did publish our rationale for resigning, and that's available in the American Journal of Transplantation. We're very grateful for our academic and scholarly community for allowing the space for that. But it really became an issue of acknowledgement.
Yeah, I can see that. I think, I think it's, first of all, very courageous to stand up for what you as individuals collectively, believe, and to try and support patients and donors in the community in any way that you can. So, I mean, everyone has their own opinions on what should or shouldn't be done, but, I think if you're sticking to what you guys as a group believe is in the best interest for patients and donors, then, I think that's to be commended for you. I think one of the things I'm curious about, Macey, is given all that you've done in all of these different capacities, the OPTN is sort of like at a crossroads, right? And so, how do we go forward in a manner to support patients and donors and have them, feel confident about the process here in the United States? What do you think?
So my answer to that is very simple. HRSA and the government do not make transplants happen. Your transplant centers, your OPOs, and your professionals in this room are the people that make transplants happen for patients every day. And so patients that are fearful and scared that the system's gonna blow up, nobody's gonna be able to give me a transplant, that's really not true, because the government, HRSA, that's not where transplants happen. They happen in hospitals and communities. And so I think if you can preach that gospel, that message to the community, patients will feel better about the state of the system. I think this is reflective of larger societal and government issues, and so I think we're just kind of a small piece of that, and reminding people that transplants happen in their communities with doctors, not with the government, I think is really important.
Yeah.
I do think it's really important to remember that we can and should have great faith in the current OPTN, the new OPTN board. Sure. On our current and new OPTN board are a lot of professionals. Their hearts are in the right place. Their hearts and their expertise are completely with the patients, including our own immediate past president, Kathy Murphy, who serves in the Histo Committee on the board and I believe is on the executive committee as well. So I think those people will not, let the system down. I do want to highlight, because Macey, you are so busy, in addition to giving all these talks, you're extremely well published and frequently published. You and Lloyd Ratner had a great paper out that really encapsulates, puts numbers on volunteerism to the OPTN. Can you tell the audience what value the OPTN is getting from even some of the people that are sitting in this room, maybe, that are volunteering for the OPTN?
Yeah, so this was one of my most favorite papers I was able to quantify. And I'll tell you that the numbers I'm gonna tell you right now are actual very conservative estimates, because we don't have good time data from the amount of hours that someone volunteers in the OPTN. But the OPTN is run by nearly 600 volunteer positions, filled by almost 460 people. So that's task forces, that's committees, that's board, and all board leadership and committees in that regard. This is equating to about 4.6 million hours. 42,000 hours annually. And that money, I'm sorry, I said hours, $4.6 million of time. And that is a conservative estimate based on, what someone might earn if they were a government employee, not calculating actual salaries of our transplant community professionals. $4.6 million of volunteer effort goes into managing and directing the OPTN. That is more than half of federal appropriations to date, prior to modernization funds increasing. So the OPTN cannot function without the experts in the transplant community, and maintaining their position and a seat at the table, I think, is of utmost importance and critical, a critical thing to move forward as we see these changes and transitions. So ensuring that representation from ASHI, from all of the other societies, from patients and donor families are at the table on those boards, I think is really where advocacy can shine right now, is ensuring that representation remains, because it is very clear that the work cannot be done without the volunteers.
Yeah.
So, Macey, what's one thing that the board as it exists right now, what's one positive step that they can take? What's the next positive step that you'd like to see happen at a national level?
So right now, I'm hearing that committee meetings are being canceled. I'm hearing that some, things are happening because of the government being shut down. But hopefully those things will resume. And when they resume, people can still keep showing up. Showing up is hard to do when you're burnt out and when there's a lot of stress going on around you. And I will say that my resignation, our resignation, the resignation of the patient and donors was not because we didn't want to keep showing up. It was because we had something to say and we weren't being heard, and that was our way to say it. So staying in the room, I think, is what the people can still do today. The current OPTN president, John Maggie, he's fantastic. Side note, he was my cousin's transplant surgeon who actually took my kidney and put it in my cousin. So he's leading the OPTN Board of Directors right now. He's a wonderful person, and they are all trying their hardest, as Kelly shared. They need to stick around, and they need to keep talking, and they need to keep having critical conversations and being heard, so this does not become a complete kind of government takeover, which is kind of the way it's been feeling to a lot of people.
So I think there are so many projects and initiatives and changes of focus in projects and initiatives in the U.S. transplant system. So, we were kind of expanding to, broader sharing, and then the progress on that has been paused to kind of attack like out of sequence allocation. There's IOTA. How do you feel about any of these, projects that are going on in the direction that they're headed, and how the transplant centers are going to respond to some of these things?
Well, I think there's a lot of confusion right now. I think continuous distribution, which was the framework that was architected to move organ allocation in a way that was fair, should continue. And I think dealing with challenges with public perception around out-of-sequence organ allocation is really important. But I think those two things can happen in tandem, and I don't think an all-out stop on continuous distribution policy development should continue to happen while we advance solving some of the challenges with policy related to out-of-sequence organ allocation.
From your purview, what's the opinion of the transplant community about, initiatives like IOTA? We have, and can you give like a basic explanation of generally what that is? There are quite a few centers participating in it now, but expanding that, of course, would be the next step. From your purview, what are you hearing people feel about that? What's the palette?
So IOTA is a complex model that is going to change, or is changing, how payments are delivered and reimbursements. It's a value-based kind of purchasing model, if you will. The focus on incentives is important, I think, but there's, I think, a lot of unintended consequences with IOTA that we are I think a lot of people foresaw and foreshadowed, but maybe that wasn't really taken into consideration. I think that IOTA has, it's pushing for more transplants to happen, right? So the goal is to get more kidney transplants happening at most centers. And it assigns performance points for transplant centers, but it also has some financial penalties if you don't meet them. But the financial penalties are so small that I'm hearing that a lot of centers would rather pay the penalty than deal with the burden of change for some of these potentially maybe not appropriate metrics that people are feeling.
Now, for those in our audience who haven't heard of IOTA before, can you just real quickly, what does IOTA stand for?
So IOTA,
they can look it up afterwards.
Okay, it's the Increasing Organ Transplant Access Model. Okay, so the point is to increase access to transplantation. And it's a very novel and important goal that I think all transplant centers want to have. I think the devil is in the details with IOTA, not its main purpose to do that.
Devil's in the details.
That's sort of like when they ask if you want a late checkout, you're just gonna go ahead and take the
All day.
Increasing Organ Transplant Access Model. Okay, so the point is to increase access to transplantation. And it's a very novel and important goal that I think all transplant centers want to have. I think the devil is in the details with IOTA, not its main purpose to do that.
Devil's in the details.
That's sort of like when they ask if you want a late checkout, you're just gonna go ahead and take the
All day.
take the penalty. You're gonna go ahead and take the fine.
Yeah.
Sounds like that's the philosophy of the centers here. Just go ahead and pay the fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some resource allocation issues I'm hearing, right? So them shifting kind of focus and resources towards advancing numbers can divert from some other critical needs of transplant programs. I'm hearing there might be needs to increase staffing, and we all know that's a challenge no matter what in constricted budgetary environments at hospitals. I also am hearing that there's some conflicting metrics, right? So the model creates some contradictory incentives while you have high transplant volume being rewarded. Offer acceptance and graft survival measures could push hospitals towards more conservative practices, which is something that we're also trying to avoid, making sure everyone has access to transplant. So taking higher risk organs is also important.
And of course, OPOs, there's pressure on OPOs to offer more and more,
right.
Shall we say, high KDPI organs, for example, and things like that.
Right. And importantly, living donation isn't really part of its design or performance metrics, but it really has indirect ripple effects, I think, and could really influence transplant center behavior in that way and patient flow. So it will impact living donor activity over time, but I think I'm on a watch and wait with IOTA right now. It was implemented July 1st, so we're now, in early October.
Early.
The government is shut down. CMS and other agencies are struggling with workforce. As Kelly mentioned, this is the first time that OPTN operations have been impacted by a government shutdown. And I think I'm hearing also that, a lot of people are leaving the government. So people that have been working in these agencies, working on these issues in transplantation, may be calling their friends around the country in other industries saying, I need another job. And so I think we're going to be seeing maybe the repercussions of that on our field when the government does reopen. There may be less people working on these issues with us.
Yeah, some of the concerns that I think of, there are so many different things, some innovative things impacting transplantation, and then some of these very politicized things impacting transplantation. I know a good friend of mine runs one of the OPOs north of us, and had mentioned that one of his proteges in his leadership team has decided to quit and completely leave the field, mostly because of what OPOs are going through and the kind of constant feedback that all the problems in the transplant system feed back to the OPO, and the OPOs are under all of this pressure. So there's a lot of pressure on the system right now. There are some things in the wings trying to innovate to relieve that pressure too, and you're a big part, and your center is a huge part of some of those movements. You just got back from a xenotransplantation meeting, and NYU, of course, is one of the leaders in xenotransplantation innovation. So tell us about the work that you've had going on. Tell us about this meeting that you just went to. Tell us all things xeno.
So you're right? We're never going to have enough human organs to go around. We continue to think about this problem and think we can get 50,000 transplants or 60,000 transplants. Whatever goal we have, we're just going to have more people because chronic disease epidemic is continuing, right? So non-human organs, whether they are porcine, so pig organs, which what we are doing now, living people are breathing, walking around today with pig kidneys in them, I think is the next frontier while we await bioengineered and other forms of non-human organs, which will hopefully be, an organ on a shelf one day, right? So that the OPOs that, as Kelly mentioned, they are under extreme pressure. I know OPOs that are in my knowledge, anecdotally, and some from old data, some of the highest performing OPOs based on some of the new metrics are going to be at risk of closing in 2026. There's voluntary mergers going on right now. So in Texas, 2 of the OPOs have voluntarily decided to merge, pending CMS approval. I think I could probably give you 5 more examples of where that would happen in other places in the country. While they're also trying to determine if those metrics are good, there's an active lawsuit going on. OPOs have sued the government over the metrics and their potential closure. So, I expect those things to not shake out until early 2026. But in the meantime, to answer Kelly's main question, yes, xenotransplantation is where I think we should be focusing our attention to ensure we can get some level of patient survival, patient quality of life. And in my work, I'm leading the patient experience in xenotransplant work. I run the qualitative research core in our center at NYU, and it's one thing for a metric of a year or 6 months to be defined, but it is another thing to hear from a patient freedom from dialysis, even if it was only 130 days, which Ms. Tawana Looney did lose her kidney, but I spoke with her many, many times, and she still said this was not a failure because we can learn from this failure and keep going. These early patients in these xeno studies, clinical trials are about to begin. The early patients have all been under compassionate use, FDA, clearance for compassionate use cases. And our responsibility is to tell their stories and to find ways to maintain their transplants in a way that is good for them and create metrics that matter to them.
Yeah, I think it's so important to point out that just because, you're right, someone loses one of these transplants, right, that there's so much valuable information and it's in the failure itself, right? And that, as a community, that's part of how we continue to push sort of the envelope forward and evolve from where we are today to where we should be, so to speak. Yeah. I'm curious though, how do you see, like ASHI or, the societies outside of like AST playing a role in like the xenotransplant evolution, if you will?
Well, you guys are the ones that help us find the right matches, and you guys are the ones that help us understand immune tolerance and all of these things. That is going to be critical. These early patients are on, high levels of immunosuppression that I'm seeing as differing from our human solid organ transplant patients. And that really needs to be worked out. And I think that is where you guys need to get to work. Work with Alex, work with all these other wonderful people that are trying to help this issue, because patients are really depending on this. They want this. The reason that we have clinical trials cleared in this country is because in 2023, the National Kidney Foundation, my friend Heather Murphy, put together this externally led patient meeting with FDA there. And they had all the patients lined up that didn't know really a lot about xeno, but knew that it was an opportunity for them, that maybe in the future they would not need dialysis, or maybe in the future they wouldn't be waiting on a transplant, because when they needed one, it would be able to be, from a pig or off the shelf. And that is the meeting that changed the FDA's opinion and cleared trials. It was the patient voice. And the patients want you all to help. So that's my message to this group.
Yeah,
Keep going.
I do think that it's really important for the audience to consider, and we are going to open it up for Q&A here pretty soon. So, we often think about innovation and histocompatibility and immunogenetics being like the next great test, the next molecular diagnostic. But maybe what we need to be thinking about more broadly is the next flow cross-match that is for porcine purposes, the next single antigen test that has SLE and other targets on it that are porcine instead of human, to make the compatibilities for these transplants happen. It's well worth a thought. Jeremy, did you have a question?
Well, you made a reference earlier to a particular patient who had an experience with xenotransplantation. Tell us about that patient and maybe how our audience can find and look up that case later.
So, Tawana Looney donated a kidney to her mom. I think it was 1999 or something like that. So, prior living donor, ended up developing complications from pregnancy, ended up needing a kidney herself, becoming so highly sensitized that she was waiting for, I think it was 8 or 9 years, unable to get a human transplant. And it broke my heart as a living donor myself, thinking about this and doing a lot of work. Another big piece of my work is understanding living donor outcomes, finding out how to track them, trying to understand what conditions create kidney failure in someone who was previously cleared to donate. And Tawana never gave up hope. She's a woman of faith and really stood the test of time with her faith. And our friend and colleague, Dr. Jamie Locke at University of Alabama, at the time had, really been trying to get her a transplant, and she didn't get one. And we ended up, transferring her care to NYU and getting the FDA approval to do the xenotransplant. And she was not the first patient to get a xeno, but the first prior living donor to get a xenotransplant. And so she, ended up living for 4 months or so with that kidney transplant, and then it ended up needing to come out, so she had the explant. And she went back on dialysis, and she's on dialysis today. She's living in Alabama, and you can see all about her in the news. You can Google Tawana Looney, and you can see, all of the news stories that she did. But her message to the world really is keep going. Don't stop. Just because I tried this and it didn't work doesn't mean that Tim Andrews, who is now the longest living patient with a kidney xeno, he's living today with that. He's at like 7 months now. There's another patient as well today. We're going to have more patients. We're working them up now for the trial. Trials are cleared. They are going to begin. I do think you will see a lot less kind of public displays around the trials. I think we had a lot of media attention early on these patients, but I think moving forward, you're going to see a lot less of that. I think it's important, for the patients, giving them their privacy throughout these trials. She endured a lot, and she's a wonderful woman, and I think her story deserves to be shared with the world.
Thank you so much. Now, you mentioned there, I almost want to pivot slightly. You mentioned media coverage there, right? And that maybe there'll be a shift in media coverage, right? The transplant system, there's been a lot of negative media coverage recently. What is the media missing about the transplant field in general? Where's the misperception what do you think what's the biggest thing the media is missing in this story?
So I think that the media plays a great role in public awareness. I won't say education, I'll say awareness, because I don't know if they're providing actual education. I will say there is a difference between earned media and media advocacy, right? So there's a lot of media advocacy going on in transplantation. You've seen big stories in the New York Times that have highlighted those critical comments that I was talking about. I think the media has not shared the patient experience in transplantation. I think they have kind of glazed over that because the more human side doesn't always bleed, and the headlines like to bleed, and if it bleeds, it leads. And I think the positive side of transplant, what are we doing to make these transplants possible? What are we doing to enable the future of innovation in transplantation, is being covered, but maybe not as in-depth with the humanistic aspect as it could be, because we're really focused on kind of politics and scandal and government things right now.
Yeah.
You're not wrong.
I think I want to. We've touched on a lot of really important topics, so I want to open this discussion up to the audience to ask Dr. Levan any questions that you might have. I will say that from my experience, there are very few questions that I have ever asked her that she doesn't have some insight on or an opinion on. So this is an awesome opportunity for our live audience to ask Dr. Levan any questions. So please come up to the microphone if you have any questions for Dr. Levan. While people are considering that, I know you shared that you have recently heard that you have a new article accepted, and it touches on some of these topics. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so the new article is about moving from theory to actual practice in clinical xenotransplantation. And we did study these patients. We talked to them, and what is their definition of success? And how do we define that as we create metrics for xenotransplantation? We have to have metrics. That's how things work. That's how things get paid for. That's how trials go. But trying to define those in a patient-centric way. And so we authored a paper in the American Journal of Transplantation that will be out soon. I've just got the proofs. And the 3 living patients that today have participated are authors on that paper. And so I think that is a really awesome way that our academic community can share with our patients, who are the reason we're all here, right? It's because we're able to hear them and give them hope and another choice. So,
That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Good morning.
Hit lead off for us.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for this really interesting conversation. I have a question about patients who receive a xenotransplantation and then the graft fails, and ultimately I would bet that there's a hope that they would get relisted in UNOS, but does UNOS have a mechanism to give them back their wait time?
That is a fantastic question. Very good question. I can answer you and say that is not a formal mechanism that I am currently aware of. I do think that is one of the challenges with why we have not gone and seen some more xeno hearts transplants, because we're going to need to create a variance in our policy system so that we we have a rescue, and that we're able to accept a patient in a study like that would have that option. I will say that the patients now believe that they will be able to get a kidney transplant if their kidney fails. Someone like Miss Looney is still sensitized to the point where she's unable to receive. So that piece you can't change with policy, right? But for example, the other two that are currently walking around today, I believe that they think that they would get relisted. And I'm hopeful that our governance structure of our transplant system will integrate fully with the FDA as we figure these things out. Yeah. It's very important. Thank you for your question.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us. So my question is for anybody on the stage here. I'm looking for advice that I could bring back to my lab or my institution and how to navigate through all of these changes. Restructuring of the OPTN, political climate that we're in, misperceptions in the media, there's ongoing lawsuits with our transplant centers. What can I do to reassure my staff to make sure that we're still functioning as we should?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I do think the things that you see in the media, and those things have impact, right? So I know there's been a lot of chatter about the massive withdrawal in people registered on state lists to be organ donors following these New York Times articles. So they are having a tangible impact on our transplant system and the ability of people to get transplants in this country. That brings a lot of fear, not just for the patients that are waiting for those precious organs, but the people who are employed in these systems and rely on them for their living. I would say, and reiterate something that Macey said earlier, that while the government over people who are employed in these systems and rely on them for their living, I would say, and reiterate something that Macey said earlier, that while the government oversees this process, at the core of this process is us. And I think the transplant community has always made clear that no matter what, the transplant community will move forward, will continue to serve patients as much as is possible. I know that when I see those articles and I see non-factual statements, I'm just not good at not commenting on those statements. So I think we need to be factual. I think we need to be honest and vocal in constructive ways to let our patients and our fellows in the community know that we're not going to stop.
It starts with you, leadership. It starts with everybody here. And I think inspiring trust, which is broken in many ways nationally. Kelly mentioned a fact, right? I think it's like an average of 400 a day. People are taking their names off of state registries. Donate Life is, reporting unprecedented numbers. It's trust and rebuilding that trust in every community, because donation happens in communities, transplants happen in communities, and it happens because of you. So trust and leadership.
Thank you.
Yeah, all I'll tell you is that I think for a long time, professional societies have sort of acted in the background to support a number of things in an apolitical nature, as I think they should be. I think it's a moment in time where we stand today that we can't continue to be like a force behind in the lab, in the surgery OR rooms, right? We're at a point in time where it's time to use the platforms we have as clinicians, scientists, laboratorians, and speak the truth, as they both mentioned, right? We don't have to make it a political message. We can state what we know as experts here. And that's what I try to do where I am, is highlight what we know and what we don't know. And I think in that you build the trust that Macey is so importantly highlighting.
I would maybe add, let's keep proving that narrative wrong, that the system doesn't work well. We continue to set records every year for the number of organs being offered, the number of transplants being performed. We continue to innovate and come up with new technologies, new solutions, and let's keep going and keep proving them wrong.
Madam President.
Madam President.
That's going to take some getting used to. Thank you for being here today, Dr. Levan. My question is, I'm from Canada, I should disclose that, so I still am wrapping my head around all these things, and I learn a lot from Kelly all the time. But you talked earlier about IOTA's impact. There'll be sort of peripheral change, impact to living donation. I think about living donation. I'm a living donor also, and I think that we do have a shortage of organs, and we're looking for other ways to find that. You mentioned, your patient who had been a living donor went on to need to be transplanted, and that I wonder often, why don't we have more metrics for safety for living donors? We put a lot of effort into understanding impact of outcome of transplant, all these metrics to say that. But I think we have a huge resource of available kidneys in people walking around, and I think if there was a better metric for evidence for safety for living donors, that perhaps that would be also another wonderful place for people to help other people, because it's an amazing experience. And I think that perhaps that's another unexplored avenue. And I'm curious to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, so living donation, I think we need to make possible for everyone who needs a kidney now, because, we're still on the frontier and innovation with the non-human organs. I think that we have a lack of education around compatibility and what that really means in transplantation and living donation. I think every candidate needs to understand, their opportunities for getting a better match, even through compatibility matching. I think education on kidney exchange should be more universal. I know people believe that it is, everyone knows about it, but I'm certain they don't. And so I think education around kidney exchange, compatibility matching, and seeing if we can have everyone get one kidney for life is really important.
Yeah.
Yes.
I totally agree with you, and I think that then it needs to be, needs to be flexibility for donors and timing. Employers need to be understanding of that. Living Donor Circle of Excellence is a great program, but it's not available to everybody, and I think, financial barriers shouldn't be a reason to not be a donor, but not everyone can just say, okay, tell me when next year I'm going to be off work. It's not always feasible. So I agree with you. Thank you.
I want to say too, Anne, to your question, that their public comment for the current policy proposals in the U.S. just closed. And one of those policies was from the Living Donor Committee, and it was about expanding data collection and having OPTN supported lifelong monitoring and data collection for living donors. That would be a very heavy lift from a data standpoint, but also it will be extremely expensive to institute. So we'll see how that policy did in public comment. I know in my region the feedback was very mixed because of the positive parts, but also the cost and data collection associated concerns. But it's definitely a huge area of discussion, I'm sure, not just in the US.
You think with EMRs and we live in a digital age, it just should not be that expensive. Maybe I'm naive, but I think that it's, the data are there. It's just a matter of pulling them out. And, I have blood work done all the time. It does not go into a just so you know, Canada's not doing better. We do not have a way of tracking metrics of living donors either, but I can't help but think about that when we have these conversations, and I'm glad to hear it was in the public comment. Thanks, Kelly.
I'll say that we do have a new study that was just funded by the NIH to utilize Epic Cosmos, which is a database of, lots and lots and lots of people and their data. And I believe we have a cohort of many, 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 many thousands of living donors that we're going to be able to kind of pilot what you're saying for donor outcomes. So regardless of our ability to institute, as Kelly said, a registry that is functional from a logistical capacity, the science will go on, and EHRs, I think, will save the day.
Yeah, thank you. And congratulations on your grant.
Thank you.
I have two questions on IOTA model. So any policy change back in UNOS, there will be a committee, they discuss laws, put together the proposals and go to the public comment. With that whole process, then bring it to alive. But the IOTA model is a lot of surprise. So the government forced 50% of the transplant program must involve in IOTA model. So my question is, who is behind the masterminds? Is this entirely different group, or who comes with that policy? Hey, you need to be part of IOTA model.
So let me make sure I understand. So yes, OPTN is not overseeing IOTA. OPTN did not create IOTA. IOTA came from CMS and a group within CMS who developed this model and put it forth. The same as public comment that the OPTN has, I do believe existed for IOTA, and I think there was a lot of mixed public opinion from the major societies, from the hospital associations about IOTA. And no matter what happened, it still went into effect. And I think that CMS is going to have to deal with the repercussions of that as we move forward. But it's CMS and a group of people there.
Okay. So the second question is, so it has been 3 months now since the IOTA was implemented. So who collects the data? Do they look at the data, and is there any data available? Their goal is increase the transplantation, increase the acceptance rates, so then the long-term survival. So my worry is the patients with the highly sensitized patients may not get any transplantation. Right. That's the biggest concern that I have. Is there any data out there?
I have yet to see any data from IOTA. I would expect maybe in 2026.
Excellent. Wonderful talk. Thank you so much. I guess my question is, so you say transplants happen in communities, right? But we know that, historically speaking, there are certain communities that have a greater distrust in the medical community to begin with. And it might be too early to have the data on this, but, with all the things that are coming out, are we seeing a disproportionate impact in those communities and their distrust in organ donation, or even like willingness to volunteer for these clinical trials for xenotransplant? And then, even if there's not the data, is there a plan to kind of help these communities along as we kind of try to navigate this process even more?
It's a fantastic question and a perfect observation. Yes, there are communities that are adversely impacted by mistrust more so than others. I do think it is going to be a major challenge in bringing xenotransplantation, ensuring that everyone understands that it's honestly a little bit separate from allocation, right? So we have two separate worlds here. And so I think education is really going to be important there. I do not know of any initiatives currently that are collecting that data outside of our traditional kind of data collection that the OPTN is collecting. I know Donate Life America is really trying to understand why people are saying no to registration, and I'm going to be working on some research with them in that way, and then trying to design targeted interventions for specific communities that meet them where they are. That's going to take time, but it's important. Yeah. Thanks for raising the point.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I can't think of a better last person to have at the mic than our immediate past president and your OPTN board representative, Dr. Murphy.
Yes, so thank you for this opportunity to ask this question, and you brought up some very good points about live donor transplantation, but I wanted to know what the panel thought about some of the kidney pair donor programs that are basically privatized and now for profit? That's the first question. And then secondly, related to live donor transplantation and non-directed donors, altruistic donors, some of the data that's been out lately has shown that there's a rise in suicide in these live donors, and the live donors that are committing suicide are non-directed donors.
So it's a tragedy anytime anyone dies by suicide, especially when it is tied to our space. I have long argued for better and extensive psychosocial evaluations and psychosocial follow-up for living donation, which we do not have. OPTN policy does not require psychosocial follow-up outside of its limited data collection on, creatinines and all of those lab values. So it's a problem, and we have to find ways to address it. I think it does start with better screening and standardization to those practices. First question again, I'm sorry, I answered the...
It was about the kidney pair donors and live donors being privatized and for profit now.
So I think I'm hearing and I'm suspicious that the federal government will ultimately find a way to revise the final rule. And I think they have an opportunity to decide whether or not they would like to clarify the allocation status of KPD. And I think with that will come opportunities to better understand these registries and how they function, and how and should they function.
If the OPTN had a better system, if they had established a better KPD system, they tried, because I was involved in it too, but it didn't work well because it was just too, it just was not nimble enough and it wasn't flexible enough. Right. But I think that's a problem. I just think that it needs to be addressed, because I don't think that live donor transplantation should be monetized or made for profit.
Yeah, I agree. And I know that some of the incentive for centers to participate and for living donors to participate in those particular programs are, vouchers, this insurance, some protections and reimbursements. And I'll say very transparently, for my donation, I specifically chose not to participate in one of those national sharing programs because I wanted my kidney to stay locally in my community. I did not want my kidney to go here, there, and yon. I don't know if those programs also specifically provide post-donation psychosocial support, which it sounds like in the current trend might be a consideration in addition to, insurance, reimbursement, those types of things. Living donors should have a lifetime of provision of psychosocial support through all the different ranges of emotions they might experience post-donation, which are kind of hard sometimes to categorize pre-donation. And I think it's a conversation that the community does need to think about, because I know that Donate Life America is trying to champion a national living donor registry. And I believe that the RFP has already been out and closed, and I believe that the winner of that RFP was one of these privatized national kidney pair donation programs. So that gives us all something to think about.
Well, in some of the policies, just to say one last thing about that, is if you encouraged their live donors to donate in advance, and you're promising the recipient that the candidate will get a transplant, and their CPRA is 99.99, that's not going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think on that, please join me in thanking Macey for spending so much time with us up here and doing this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is wonderful. Guys, don't forget, Coffee and Compatibility is on YouTube, and we are trying so hard to build our YouTube subscriber presence so that we can bring the podcast to you in new and innovative ways, so that ASHI can expand what they bring to you on the ASHI HLA YouTube panel. We need you guys, so please, if you have not subscribed yet, please just click click subscribe. There's no obligation other than clicking subscribe. Help us grow our viewership. Listen to us on Spotify, on any of your regular podcast listenership stations.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. This is for you. Thank you.